A talkie talk? Yeah.
This room has some weird echoes, so
Okay. I'm not very good with these. Okay, got it. So I think the best thing to do before we get started is go ahead and let's do a round of introductions. It's nice to know who's here, and for everybody else to kind of put names with faces that we've all seen two-dimensionally over the last couple of years. So I'll start. My name is Ryan Taylor. I am the Soil Health Program Coordinator for the Colorado Department of Agriculture. And I'm sure you guys all know who I am because I've been helping develop this soil health program over the last year. Oh, I should probably get that.
Hi, I'm Steve Flutter. I just started with experimentation last fall on soil science, and I'm going to be helping out with the rangeland monitoring portion of the Star Grazing Lands. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that's supposed to say land PKS. I'm not sure what happened to the L. Thank you, Ryan. Doesn't matter. So I'm going to talk a little bit about options to mold and app you guys can use, and there'll be some demos on the screen, and we'll also take you outside and see how that.
Good morning. I'm the Director of the Conservation Services Division at the Department of Ag, Colorado School.
I'm Eva Conway. I'm with the High Desert Conservation District.
I'm Rocky Rocco, and I'm district guide with High Desert Conservation District.
I work with the Department of Agriculture, mostly water, but I like soil too.
I'm going to introduce myself at Colorado State University Extension.
Susan Conservation Gilbert, Delta Conservation District. Good to see you.
I'm Shanna Harness, and I'm helping the Delta Conservation District.
I'm James Riley. I'm the Deputy Director of the Experimentation and Professor of Politics.
Greg Glenn, Dolores Water Conservancy District, Star Access Project, concerned in the grounds in Southwest Colorado.
My name is Susan Ron, I'm with the Rock County Conservation District. I'm Keith Green with Colorado Conservation District in Creighton.
Jerry Allen, Shadow Conservation District in Montrose.
I'm Penny Bishop, Shadow Conservation District, also in Montrose.
My name is Bill Clinton from Moscow Hooper Conservation District at Moscow County.
Good morning, everybody. It's so good to see all your smiling faces and talking about soil today. I'm Susie Whatever, and then I'm the program manager for the State Conservation Board, working with the 74 conservation districts in Colorado. I'm in the Conservation Services Division, working with Les at the Department of Ag.
Good morning, this is John Miller. I'm the Western Regional Field Specialist for the Colorado State Conservation Board.
There were 76 conservation districts when we started a year ago. But it reminded me we're down to 74. So just a little bit of housekeeping. This is the agenda that I sent out to everybody. One of our presenters, Ian Axland, who does the soil moisture probe installation, manufacturing and installation, he wasn't able to be over here today. So the soil moisture probes talk from 9:45 to 10:45 is now going to be done by me. So that's probably going to be 9:45 to maybe 9:50 or 10 o'clock. But I think I'm going to give Brad an opportunity to talk about some of the drought planning. If you haven't heard that talk, it's a good one. So I just wanted to kind of, let you guys know that, one, I'm sorry. I want to make sure that, you guys get the bank, the monthly bank card. I know a lot of people throw away to here. But we'll probably be getting out a little bit early and get you heading back in the right direction home. So in front of you, we've provided some resources for you. In your green folder, on the left-hand side, you have directions on basically how to geolocate with your phone, right? Can anybody tell me why that's important? Go ahead.
Probably want to document your soil sample, but.
Right. Remember, we're taking soil samples in year 1 and in year 3, right? So when you get into year 3, it'll be nice to have that information cached somewhere. So if anybody doesn't have it written down, we'll use that piece of paper or whatever it is. We'll have that documentation with us, right? The right side of your folder contains very simplified version of pictures of how to take soil sample. There's a little bit longer version written out that kind of describes in more detail how to do that. In addition, there's some tutorial material that Steve put together from PandPKS, and there's a soil moisture probe installation documentation. And that's the big deal, right? The soil moisture probe installation is probably going to be the linchpin for most of you, right? I'm sure a lot of people here have done plenty of soil sampling. So some of this might be redundant, we'll go over that. But the soil moisture probe installation is really the linchpin of our meeting today, and Ian can't be here, but I'll do my best to demonstrate once we get out in the field, talk about, how we get to those sites and how we do that installation. I want everybody to know that YouTube videos and more detailed instructions, step-by-step instructions will come out. April 15th, we're scheduled to do our first installation. We will be recording that. So I guess what I'm saying is if you leave here today feeling a little bit uncomfortable with the soil moisture probes, know that we will have more material coming out, and my plan is to come out and do the first soil moisture probe installation in every district when we roll those out. Okay. And hopefully later this year, but it might be as late as next year, turning that on. That's why I make sure you play out and getting stuff ordered and actually manufactured. So there's also a sheet in there that kind of gives you an idea about how to interpret a soil analysis test, right? Soil health test. Texture, pH, there's a lot of factors that go into that, but it's got some basic ranges to help you guys interpret those with the producers that you're working with. Excuse me. There's also a Quivira soil health workbook. It's a lot of good information. If you haven't ever had an soil class, this book really does a good job. I'm kind of explaining the basics of soil chemistry, soil physics, soil biology, things of that nature. So those are the resources in front of you. I've got some things over here on the table, and I'll have you guys grab them. They're soil sampling bags from Ward, a quote that has to go in with every soil sample that tells Ward Labs, what they need. But each district, depending on which grant you're working with, is going to have a different number of soil sample submission forms and quotes that you need, as well as how many bags, right? Okay, I think that covers most of the resources we have for you today. I do want to talk a little bit about technical assistance providers. And this is specifically the technical assistance providers that are on that list that we provided to you. There are several districts who are kind of doing I don't want to say doing their own today, but we're not trying to dictate to any district that we have this. The two, the rangeland and the cropping system technical assistance provider that we provided for each conservation district, we are paying for that. Right, so if you wanted to use your capacity dollars to pay somebody else, that's totally fine. But I just want to be really clear about what's required of that. So those technical assistance providers that we're paying for are responsible for going out with the district on the first 2 consultations. And then to provide the technical assistance, you know, as things go along. For example, I want a companion plant into my corn. How do I do that? When do I do that? What type of crop I use? That will be the technical assistance provided post consultation soil sampling. And then I think as we get into soil moisture probe installation, I think but I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on what those technical assistance providers were required to do, or what we're asking them to do, what those requirements are, and so that the conservation districts were all on the same page. Are there any questions about that?
2 visits per consultant or per technical assistant provider, so.
Correct.
2 rangeland visits, 2 farm visits.
Correct. Right. So if you theoretically say you have 5 districts or 5 users you're working with, 2 rangeland cropping, then the first 4 is what we covered. 2 for each. Yes.
And I feel like I kind of need to reel back in something. As we were doing all the tasks, we wanted to make sure we had a good variety, and also we're inclusive of those people on our team that are qualified to give some technical assistance. And I just wanted to make a note that one of those people sitting next to me, Tom Miller, we included him in there because he's been doing this work for a long time. He knows what he's doing, and we appreciate that. I almost think that by having him in there, he is kind of a go-to person because a lot of people know him. He's fun to work with. And he's really reliable. And so we might need to relook at how much we use him because it could at some point start to impact his job. So I just want to say that if at some point we say, hey, John isn't available to help you, I just wanted to make sure, you know, there are other places that you could go in case that isn't possible for his work level, and I talked to him about it and said, well, I don't want him out all things, all hours of the day, and also doing his regular job with the districts. And so we're at a point where just bear with us. This is the first year of implementing this program, and we tried to think of everything, but some things might be a little clunky. And so I just wanted to say, if it comes to be that we might have to pull John back because of time, I just want you to know that it's don't take it personally. It's just something we're trying to do to manage his life and work balance and things like that. So.
And I will try to.
That's John. He's always wanting to help as much as he can. So, thanks for letting me.
No, absolutely. I really appreciate that because it's as we all know, it's very unique based on what tax. It's hard to say no sometimes. Is anybody having issues around the technical assistance providers in their districts? Has everybody made contact or has somebody they're working with? Yeah.
If you don't have a finish line, protect and help is for.
No, there's just tasks with 2. Right.
If you don't have finish line, let's see if you know.
It's not set up that way. I mean, I get what you're saying, but the reason why we decided not to was that much like Cindy saying about John, all these technical assistance providers for the most part, I mean, there are some consultants on that list. Most of them have another job. And so we'll talk about it, I'll get back to you, but my thought is I don't want to overburden somebody that's already has a heck of a. Go ahead, Rita.
I didn't want to throw you under the bus.
But, yes, I was just gonna say that there are some technical assistance providers who have range and cross expertise. And, yes, sir. But it's like, you should be able to do that.
Cindy, is that something maybe we can do on a case-by-case basis to try and figure that out?
Yeah, I think so. We can talk to individual districts about what their needs are and how we can use available resources in the area.
Yeah, I didn't want to throw out a blanket policy without, talking with the team and kind of fleshing that out.
Big thing is, as we started this, we, NRCS is often the go-to in a lot of ways, and we appreciate their partnership and their contributions to this effort, but we also didn't want all of our participating conservation districts to just say, oh, NRCS, take care of this technical side, because if, they have their own programs and their own workload that they're trying to juggle, and so we don't want to disinclude them, but we also want to respect that they might be really overworked in their own program delivery. If it works that they can help you, I think that's fabulous. So we don't want to exclude NRCS, but just recognizing that if we just said, oh, NRCS take care of all of our technical needs for this program, then that could be impactful for them. So we're just looking, and it is, every district is unique, and so we just put these out there the taps out there just so that you had choices. But if it works out with your staff at NRCS or your DCTs or things like that, there's nothing wrong with adjusting it to meet your local needs.
Is that helpful? Yeah, the answer you wanted.
Conversations.
Yeah, so I think we can manage that going forward. But I think we definitely do want to do that on the case. All right, so soil sampling. Raise a hand. Who in here has done soil sampling in the past?
I don't know if I get it correct.
Oh, thanks, Paul. Okay, so before we ever go out and do a soil sample, right? It's important to ask ourselves, where are we going to sample, right? So maybe you did. So what are some things we might consider, Paul, when we go out?
Well, I think we should try to represent the entire field or whatever area we're doing. So maybe go to a variety of places. It's probably not the outlier places, the white outlier spot. Maybe we should sample that.
So you use a term in there that's really critical, right? We want to get a representative sample, right? And so we can think about a representative sample in two ways, right? Is it representative of the landscape? Is it representative of the specific field or pasture or whatever it is that we're working with, right? And so some of the things, and Paul touched on some of this too, right? Some of the things that we want to avoid are those pockets of salinity that are obvious on landscape, right? Edge of field effect is another thing we need to consider. There's compaction issues, right? What if we have a slope? Where are we going to sample? Anyway, I want this to be interactive, but I want to just talk at you. I'm going to start picking on people. Right. Top bottom, in the middle. Right. And why is that, Jerry? Right. Because water moves with gravity, right? We know that soil is going to move with that water, right? So where's our deepest soil going to be? At the bottom of the hill, it's going to have sample water, right? If we just sample one location, we're gonna misrepresent that, right? So I have a few slides here we can walk through that just kind of point this out. I know this is redundant if if soil sampling is full hat for you, I apologize. But for the people that have never done this, this is where I would like to engage. Okay. So if you have any questions or you feel like you put them on you, okay. So on the left hand side here we have a flat ag field with prepared beds and flowers. Where might be the best place to avoid sampling? What's that? So, okay, so on the right-hand side, you're right. The road is compacted, right? We have compaction, we have edge of field effect here. Look, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but especially in rangelands, you want it to be relatively convenient, right? But if where do most people do their tagging for everything? Close to home, right? So if you go out and you do a consultation and you just go to the closest pasture, that's typically probably where they're going to be. That's a high use area, right? And so is that representative of the operation? No, right? On the left-hand side here, we would really want to be in those beds if we're doing soil samples, right? We don't want to be sampling the furrow. How about here? Bill, does this look familiar?
You don't want to go too high in elevation or too low. Looks like a foreground maybe. Sort of soil, alkali, if there's something in the middle, either high or low.
I'm not going to say that you're not going to find cattle right here, but is that where we're going to spend the majority of our time? Right. So these are just some things to consider, right? What is the landscape telling? So when we walk outside, all of us who've done soil sampling, when we start going to the field that we're going to be doing demonstrations, doesn't it just kind of already start running in your head? You're just kind of looking around, right? Where would be a good spot? Like, site evaluation is really critical, right? And so I would agree, right? We have slopes that might be unusable. We have areas where we have no vegetation, very little vegetation. How about in the flat area? Where would we want to sample? Right? Would we want to bury around sample? Or would we want under the canopy of the plants? Right. So we want a mix, right? So in our sampling protocol, which I'll go into a little bit here later, we basically do an end, right? We want to pick a location, a 1 acre location that's representative of here, right? But I just wanted to point out we have topological differences, right? Here we have, not necessarily, well, we have more topological differences here on the right, but we have management differences on the left, right? How about here? We have these different biologies, right? These different ecosystems. So if this was an area where you're going to sample, where would we want to sample? What do we want to capture in this picture? There are no lines.
Well, what are you trying to do?
That's it, right? What are we trying to capture? So you want to include someone, right? Right, I understand. Yeah. Right.
Unless you're trying to characterize an internet block sites.
Right, for this program.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Specifically to this program, I should have thrown that back, because you're right. right? If we were looking at differences between the ketones, right, or the structure or composition, that would be right. We want to sample different areas in the bed. But for this program, right, we're going to have utilization, you know, from the grass and shrubland all the way up into that painting unit, right? And so we would want to kind of capture that very early, right? So we have some above ground biological variability we want to capture. Does that make sense? So if you were tasked with sampling this area, right? Let's say this is a private and lease area, right? It's extremely large. Where do we want to sample? Do we want to be up in this area? I don't want people backpacking for 3 days to collect the soil sample. Right? This is where the consultation is really important. Right? If this entire area is part of the operation, this is where that consultation you can give to the landowner and be like, you know, where are you going to be implementing these practices? Is it approachable? Right? And so I just want people to keep that in mind, right? Because in one area, I'm saying, don't just drive out and take a sample, right? But at the same time, it's the opposite, right?
Question I have, on these rangeland or ranch settings where we're doing the whole ranch, would it be appropriate to focus the sampling on the area where you're trying to make the biggest amendment? Is that kind of a good rule of thumb?
Yeah, and if, you know, this is another place where the consultation becomes really important. Where are they going to be implementing those practices? Right? Hopefully that's successful, and that's something that you can talk about, right? I can just off the top of my head, I can think of an area where that might not necessarily be the case, right? Let's say, for example, we want to do some virtual fencing, right? You know, this might be the area where they really need help with that management system, right? That would be, in my opinion, that would be the area you want to try and sample, right? Because that's what the impact is going to be made. That's what those dollars are going to cost, right? Now, I would also make the argument that the virtual fencing, you know, the 11-kilometer range that those towers have would be better utilized down here in the flatter area, right? But, you know, we've got a lot of research out on the landscape and rolling programs, so we're gonna basically have everything in front of us, right? So within the kitchen sink, I guess what I'm saying is, if you're ever in doubt, please do it. Okay. Yes.
I wonder if it would be beneficial in a situation like this where you have a large amount of land to first take a look at the soil survey and see what soil mappings there are and get an idea of what's going on in it, how it's been delineated, show differences in the soil type.
I agree with you 100%.
Might be a good first step to save yourself a little time when you get out there.
Right. So the follow-up question to that would be, have you guys ever used a soil survey?
That's a really great point, and it's sort of makes sense, a combination of those two. I mean, rangeland just not going to capture all of that, so it has to be tied to the management of that you're trying to achieve in specific area. And I guess another part, maybe we'll go over this. I thought most of the rangeland practices were like making a drought and having conservation plan.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, there could be an impact more articulated in your homes that could.
Right, when we're actually applying the dollars on the landscape, right? Like if I was shooting vertical fencing, I think maybe somebody's using electric fencing, like real fences with posts and wires, right? I would hope that that's captured. You know what I mean? So that's where I go back to circle, is it a representative sample of the utilized area? Right? Does that make sense? And go ahead.
Yeah, I hear that, but to her point with the classifications, I think a little side analysis with the classifications and knowing what soils are where and then observing your biomass. And then, you know, do we have latitude to say, this area is getting hammered harder or is in worse shape in that area? I think it would be interesting to compare the two against each other because they're under the same management. And so could we do additional samples as needed, maybe in an area that has two completely different.
Greg, you sample as much as you want. I'm gonna pay for one.
You're paying for one.
All right.
You know what I'm saying, you know?
Absolutely.
It would be interesting to know why is that one better than this one?
Yeah.
We can quantify that thing, and then our treatment effect down here, how are we comparing over here?
So I think what's happening there is a great depiction of what the program, one of the founding philosophies of the program is, right? We've started a conversation. You're absolutely right. These are all great things, right? These are conversations you're gonna be having with producers, right? That maybe haven't been happening before, right? So if your producer is down with, hey, let's get rid of this, right? We're gonna need to do some texture sampling, right? I'm assuming, Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of that could be used as match, right, from the producer side of things. So, you know, like I said, I mean, we're only going to pay for one soil sample, but that doesn't preclude you from trying to get rid of those issues. I don't want you to sacrifice what's good for the producer for the sake of, you know, just one soil sample. There's things that you can do as that manager to kind of wrote down. If that's something that the producer wants to do, right, and that's what are the producer goals in the program and outside of the program? How do we make this happen?
I see that as a teaching moment, because then the producer saying, well, why is that different than this? And quantify that through two different samples and then through the treatment.
Yes.
So now your decision, you know what is more better.
Right, and look, I mean, ultimately, we want to root that out. Right, so we, at the end of 3 years, we aggregate that data, right? Those are the things we're gonna be looking at, right? Where did we have the highest impact? You know, with what practices in which areas of the state, right? But I mean, if you wanted to set something up that was a little more research oriented to get at some of those issues, I think, you know, I mean, you're well able to get your pages. Are there any questions? Brett? Okay. Go ahead.
So if they do decide to do multiple samples, would that be something you guys like would be willing to accept those samples well with information from that? Would that if they wanted to provide that?
Yeah, sure. That would be welcome. I think that's great information for the conservation districts and the people who are discharging these programs, the eligible entities, and then I think it's great information for everybody to have, right? I would just say we're not going to require, right? The samples that we're paying for, right? That data is accurate, and I want to make that clear. It's not assigned to any particular place. Right? So when we look at the impact, we're looking at that very broadly, not very specific, right? Whereas what you guys are getting at is we really want to dive into, and soil sampling is a great way to do this, right? Especially, I shouldn't say specific, but it's a great way to do this, right? It's a good way to get at, are we having an impact? What kind of impact are we having, right? If we're successful, you know, are we successful? Great. Did we fail? Ethically? Right? I think I was saying this morning before we started, we're going to have 144 different plans up in the landscape. Right? Raise your hand if you think all 144 of them are going to go off without a hit. Okay. So we have some realists in the room, right? I can't go on vacation and have it perfect. Right? We're talking about a program lasting 3 years, and the variability across it is intense, right? I think we're gonna be super successful. I'm just saying there are gonna be some things we have to get through, right? And I'm hoping that we have enough grace on both sides of the aisle to get through those in a way that's beneficial, right? For the producer, for the districts, for the product, right? And for the greater good of Colorado. Okay. Anything else? Anybody else have any questions? Okay. So before we start to sample, right, we need to prep the site. Okay. And so for those of you that have sampled, what's the difference between this and this? Right. So this is what we would call above ground biomass, and that will not go in your soil. Right. Okay. So that's give our numbers a little bit. So
Ryan, if it does go into our sample, if there's some stamps or some leaves and stuff, after that, do those folks print it out?
yeah, so the first thing that anybody does in a lab, if it's not a dried sample, which I want to make clear here, you do not need to dry your samples. Okay. Is sit, right? Because there are any number of things that you can find in a soil sample. But what we're looking at is that what we call soil is anything less than a 2 millimeter fraction. Okay, that's the largest sand particle we consider soil.
And then, and kind of a follow-up question, how far do we go to removing, if we have a soil that's got some partially decomposed organic matter, and especially for, as a percent of organic matter, it feels kind of strange to pull all that organic matter out.
Okay. Okay, so without going too far down that rabbit hole, right? The A horizon, right at the top of that really is where that mineral and biological interaction occurs, right? And we have 3 different phases of what we call soil sampling, right? And then it's based on how far down it's broken, right? So this right here, right? You can just wipe that off, right? Here, you want to chop that biomass off at the top, right? The root mass is still included, that's biomass. Below ground, that is or will become soil organic matter, right? But the above ground biomass will come up, right? So I'm not saying you have to scrape the surface clean, because right, we do want to get, that decomposing stuff at the surface.
Are we gonna be doing this?
Yeah. Yes. So we'll go after we go through all this stuff. We're gonna go out in the field and we'll do some soil sampling. I'll kind of walk you through it. I'll show you how to install soil moisture probe very poorly. This will be the first time I've ever done it. And Steve's gonna walk you through some ideas.
And the soil moisture probe that you're installing?
Yes. Yes, so ideally what we want is a fully assembled, right? So you'll be able to tell us, we want to put it in a valve box or do we want to put it on a pole, right? And then when that gets to you, it'll be pre-assembled. Basically, all you have to do is open it up, turn it on, wait for that green light to sort of read cyan, and then it'll be it should be, ideally, it should be very simple. Okay, so we brush away, the litter at the surface, right? Now we actually need to do the good part, the digging hole, right? So if you've never done it, basically what we're looking for is a V-shaped hole, okay? And then you're just going to take that inch or 2 inches of that V down, shovel down to a depth of 7 inches, 7.5 inches, something like that. Okay, and you can put more mark on your hole. If you've got a probe that you're using, use those as well. And then you would cut away at the side, so you're just left with the center, but an even amount at each depth. Right? That's what, so back to your point, most of that carbon is being surface, right? It's also the most friable. And so sometimes we'll overrepresent the bottom of that pit. And so you want to ensure that you have an even distribution of that top subdivisions. Okay. So we have, representative at scale, at the field level. We also want a representative sample of the pit. Right? So like I was saying, things that you might find. So what's the most interesting thing anybody's ever found? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've dug up pottery sherds. I'm sure many of us have found arrowheads. Some people saying the plastic. I found old railroad wire, right? That you're going to find all manner of old bricks, right? From old buildings, things like that. These are not part of your soil sample. So rocks are the most common thing to find. As best as possible. Did you? Yeah.
So are we sitting in samples?
No. Right. So we're just going to make a composite sample, show off, they'll go ahead and we'll try it, process. It's going to be a whole list of like things you need to buy. Another 10 mesh. So just make sure that those things get removed and back up your sample. So your clean bucket is your best friend. And I would just say, if you haven't sampled before, the one takeaway I want you to have is once you identify the area that you're doing, right, and the pattern that you want you to do, and I would just take some little landscape flags with you, base it off and mark that. Always start your sampling out furthest away from the park, so that you're not walking all the way back to the main bucket. Okay. But here's what we're gonna put our 5 to 7 samples, right? In that bucket, mix it together. That's going to create our composite sample, right? So that's how we get representation of the areas, right? I debated on the number. I think that for the benefits of the program and for the ease of discharge of the program, 5 samples is good enough. Okay. So then we bag and ship. The bags are here. You guys will leave today. The bags are going to need the number of bags you're going to need. And then you're going to include the data that we want. And I wonder if I can click on this. Okay, so the soil sample submittal form is up here on the table, as well as the form that quote, kind of referenced that earlier. Both of those have to go in with the soil sample when you ship it. The districts are paying for shipping, you're paying for the analysis. Okay. But all those things need to be included. And then when you're done, there's a soil ID tracking sheet that we would like for the district or the technical assistance providers to fill out. There's 2 things on there that are really important. Okay. One of those is date sample as well as date shipped, and the other is a comment section that you can write things down if you weren't able to sample according to the protocol laid out. Right, we want a comment section there so you can make those notes available. Why is the date sample versus date shipped? Why is that important? Anybody? So what happens if that sample bag sits in your car in the middle of summer for 2 weeks? Well, it's not going to dry out, but you're so moisture. Yeah, thank you. Right, we're going to have oxidation. Right, we're going to actually have chemical changes within the soil as it sits there baking in your oven. Right, so that'll date sample versus date shift is going to give us that idea of was there any lag there? Do we need, is there something glaring there that we need to go out and say? Okay, and then additionally, as I referenced previously, the start of this talk is, it's gonna be 3 years before you go back out and do this, right? 2 years. And so in the comment section, you can put GPS coordinates, you can maybe it's a field name or a pasture name, right? At ranch, things that will jog your memory from, year 1, right? Additionally, when did you sample, right? I would make the argument that it really should be a temperature, soil temperature thing, right? So if you wanted to take a thermometer with you and make sure the temperature is fairly similar, right? I lost 2 extremely valuable crops in 2020 on September 8th, right? Because we got feet of snow and frigid temperatures, right? Last September 8th, it was 85 degrees outside, right? So those are things that you could also put in the section, right? So if you go out in year 3, right? If let's say you wrote down the temperature and it says 85 degrees, and you go out there and you're in a parka, right? That might be an indication that maybe you should wait to get out there. Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Another thing is, please write those notes as if you're telling somebody else
Correct.
how to get out there, because it may be somebody different 2 or 3 years from now doing those samples. So please give them as much information as you can.
Yeah. Great first, and then
You're gonna do this, I think it's the S4, the standard nutrient analysis, or are you gonna do PLFA or Haney?
we're stopped doing any.
Well, Haney left, but they still
You can do a version of it.
Right.
And I would say that, well, I don't want, we can have that conversation.
Okay, but
So-
we're gonna do a deeper dive.
So what we're running is a routine plus texture with the hydrometer method, right, which is critical. We're also doing, we're doing wet aggregate stability, which I think is gonna be one of those areas on rangeland where, maybe carbon doesn't change a whole lot, but maybe we see more cover and that wet aggregate stability is gonna increase. We're also doing, water holding capacity and, 24-hour respiration. The microbial stuff is really hard to get at. I literally 3-4 week incubations would give you a really well representative idea of what your soil microbiome is actually doing. But that's impractical in a commercial sense.
I have a cooperator, we've already been doing Haney and PLFA on theirs, and we're still gonna do it again anyway, because it's part of this round. He can use that as part of his match to pay for this. They're not cheap.
Yeah, I think that would be
So that we already have a baseline of it, I think it's relevant for comparing that.
sure. So yeah, the idea is, look, we want to try and assist producers to adopt those practices, right? So if we can lower the barrier there with some funding, that's what we're trying to get at, right? So yeah, you and I have a conversation about Haney and PLFA and what you're trying to get at, and we can have a talk about, practicality and theory and, what are you trying to get after, right? But yes, it's all under, you're trying to make positive strides and so on. And so we support that.
I don't know if this. You also talked about not using shovels that are less. I don't know if that is.
That's true. Unless you're doing, So, yeah, I think what Gene was saying, there's, I think what you're getting at is, if you have a rusty shovel, right? If you're not taking good care of your equipment, are you practicing good sampling practices? think those two might coincide. But Gene has it right? Make sure your bucket and your shovel or your probe are clean, right? Or at least, yeah, not with at the very least, right?
Well, that's a farmer buying a shovel, it's weird.
Then that might not be the shovel you want to use as a sample, right? I agree. That's how we talk heads off rattlesnakes and all kinds of stuff, right? But I'm saying for all intents and purposes, let's try and use it.
There's a few, so the papers, the documents, get folded up and put right next to the soil in the bag.
No, you do not put the paper in with the soil. You just have to, when you ship the soil off, you go to the post office and put it in one of those white bags or small box or however you do that. You just need to include the quote and solution. Yeah.
Don't you label that?
Yeah, so however you want to label that, right? Obviously, you're working with one field for tracking over time. So you're going to have one. But if you have a labeling convention that you're used to using, feel free to do that. When it gets to us, whatever soils, however you label that, we will use that right alongside our labeling convention. So, okay. And there is some basic information on here. We have a few other additional things that we'd like in our sample ID tracking. Okay. So here's the quote, and this is what we're doing, right? The soil restoration, the water holding capacity, the wet aggregate stability, detected by hydrometer, and routine Wilson P, right? Dictated by obviously. And so there's the quote. Here's the soil sample submittal form. We have already filled out this part for you, right? There's a comments section down here. You can also, in addition to the comments that you have in the sample ID tracking form, so basically just an Excel spreadsheet, you can also make those comments here if you so desire, right? So this might be something that you have out in the field with you, make those comments. We can then transfer those comments over the sample ID tracking form.
If we have people that are not ready to start less that are doing those, the first mention that you're operating.
So the question was, this is a call for Star Plus. What about the folks who are just doing Star on their own? That would be entire. I mean, they've signed up on their own. I would say that it's their responsibility, but if somebody comes to you and you want to help them with that, I would give you your own discretion. Yeah, absolutely. I would love for everybody to do that. But again, we get back to that. I mean, if we have hundreds and hundreds of people signing up, right? I don't want any person to feel overburdened by that, right? There's plenty on our plate. And again, so I don't want to come off as like we don't care about these people. We do actually care a lot about these people. But I also care a lot about the technical assistance providers, people, time, conservation districts, and all that stuff. So it's a balance, and I would just say use your own discretion.
I know this sample form gives all about, there's a lot about the crop to be grown as you go. Okay, I was gonna do that and get a fertilizer recommendation back.
So that is, yes, ideally, we would like for cropping system, we would like to have the soil samples in early enough so that those recommendations can be made. But I mean, that's one of the benefits of having that system. No, you can do them whenever you want. We just, as I suggested earlier, we want to make sure it's the same time of year every time we sample, right? We don't want to sample in April this year and then in August in year 3, right? Because we get possibly some wildly different.
So we have some temporary, this year or next year or February, so we will the same conditions. We will
So that's why I was saying, if it were me, I would take a thermometer with me and I would go based on soil temp versus day, because it can be wildly different. Yes. So. Any other questions? So this here, we can get it to open. So again, it's just a very simple Excel spreadsheet, right? And over here on the right-hand side is where those notes or comments, right? But here we're gonna have, we'll be able to crop type, field name, GPS locations. Those are all things that are going to assist the district or the entity that's discharging the program with the producer, right? I mean, obviously, when we aggregate all this data, crop type is going to be really important as far as how these things play out across the landscape.
Is that Excel form new or you sent it out already?
I just created it. You will receive it. Okay. So, and again, all these documents that you see before you, I will upload them and make available electronically as well.
So, when we then upload the ourselves, and like send it to you, the box, or where we're supposed to send these documents to.
Which ones?
So we fill them out, like when you just created, when we get that filled out, where do we need to submit this?
You don't have to submit anything.
That's just for our.
It's just a Google Doc. So it'll just be a living document. As you enter data, it'll just sit there. So, but it'll be something that, again, you'll be able to utilize at a later date, right? Those dates shipped, dates sampled, location, right? All that. So, I mean, I just think, you go up with a rancher, he throws you in side by side, you drive up somewhere, you take a sample. You'll be able to find that same spot in a couple years, right? So that's really what this is all about, is getting that location nailed down, getting the date sample, the dates, and then crop type. So I have a few slides here, just the ones that we went over, just to kind of have a discussion about finding a representative. I don't want to beat that horse if I don't need to. So you guys did it. No. But if you want to go over this, I think I got an idea. I did some. Does anybody else have a question about how to choose a representative sample at scale, field, or at the pit itself? Everybody pretty solid on that.
You said something about maybe take that slide with the shovel.
Yes.
We got it on the shovel, are you saying, slice off the margins of that and just use the center?
Right. So ideally, you've got a whole shovel, right? Ideally, we would have a 2-inch slice, 1 inch thick, all the way down the shovel, right? And that's what I'm saying, representative of the sample itself, the pit, right? This little hole we're digging. So, like I said, the top tends to be more friable. That's where a lot of that organic matter is, right? And so a lot of times what happens is you take that slice and the top starts to fall apart, right? So what you end up with a lot of times is you'll see a 1/2 or 1/4 inch of the stuff sloughs off the side, and you clean your shovel and you get an over-representation of the bottom as opposed to the top. So yeah, so ideally you want something about 2 inches wide, about an inch thick, all the way down the shovel for that full 7.5 inches, 7 inches.
If you take everything that's on the shovel.
So I'll show you when we go outside. I use my field knife, so I'll clean off everything but the middle, okay? And then that goes in the bucket. And you'll do that 5 times, right? So if you'll have 5 samples that are ideally 2 inches wide, 1 inch thick, all the way top, right? And then we'll mix that thoroughly, right? And that becomes our composite. Okay. 15 centimeters, so 0 to 7. I would say, I mean, we've decided on 0 to 15. If you end up at 8, I don't think it's gonna kill anything. Yeah. Thanks, it's a good one.
How clean does the bucket have to be? Like, when you say bucket, how much do you want to clean it out before one place and go to these next? Maybe you're
So-
washing out water.
No, so I turn it over a minute. Right? Let's say your composite sample weighs 5 kilograms, right? It's a lot. Let's say it's 2 kilograms, right? It's not a perfect rule, it's what I'm gonna say, but if there's a little bit of dust or something in there, you're talking about influencing your sample on, milligrams or, less than, you know what I'm saying? Your composite sample would be 9.9 sample, even if you had a little bit of contamination. You're not gonna go from 2% organic matter to 15, right? Or a nitrogen recommendation of 15 to 35 pounds per acre, right? So, I mean, I would say be as thorough as you can, and again, we're only taking one composite, right? So the overachiever in the back, who wants to do all the sampling, is gonna need to clean the bucket, right? But for you guys, that composite sample is really what we're after. So, I would say before you go to the field, I think you wash that bucket, wash the shovel, go do those 5 sub-samples for your composite, and just ensure that it happens. You solid on sampling? Okay. Couple things. Colorado Horn still has a few slots available. So if your district had to not include somebody that wanted to be included, please reach out to me or Nick Goldblazer and see if we can't get them enrolled in the programs in Colorado. The other thing I want to push really hard is the office hours. Every Monday from 11 to 12, you can come with any questions that you have. And Greg, did you want to say anything about office hours?
I really enjoy it. A lot of times it's maybe just an affirmation that I'm on the right track. My schedule is correct, my thinking is correct. Other times I have questions. And part of it for me is I'm thinking of Brian's position with all of these people all over the state and everybody's gonna have a lot of questions and a lot of other questions are gonna be the same over and over. So for the office hours, it's the chance to ask those questions because somebody else will probably have that question down the road too. And I think Brian will have to answer the same question 5 times. So because this thing is just getting reminded to figure out, I would recommend tuning in, even if you don't have a burning question, you might have a good conversation.
And that's a great point, because it really is a conversation. It's not really necessarily a Q&A, although it's kind of set up that way. But what we have seen is a lot of people come with a question they have, and then somebody else asks a question, and like, oh, well, what about this? So it really is a good conversation that helps us, right, to better manage the program, but it really is a benefit to you guys as well. Okay.
Sorry, what's Colorado Horn?
Colorado Horn is one of the eligible entities we're working with.
The road and, they're just running the program kind of like a conservation district is, and we have some spots available.
So the 3 that we're working with, Greg's here representing the Water Conservancy District. Colorado Horn is one of our eligible entities that put in an application, and the other one is the Ottawa Ranching Program. And we put out a call for applications, and those were the 3 successful applicants. Any other questions?
Send them to them and they manage. Those producers don't have to.
No, not the producers you have enrolled. What I'm saying is if you had other applicants that you couldn't admit to the program, yes, send them their way and they can try and fill those slots. And then yes, they'll manage those producers independently. But that's, I mean, since they're in your district, I mean, that would be something that you guys would probably want to navigate together.
You guys can coordinate that.
Yeah. All right. Soil moisture probe installation. We want to take a break. All right, let's take a break. Pause recording.
Really useful tool, and it might be useful and interesting for some of the ratio questions. So I'll just give a really short demonstration of that. So first off, part of it, I was a technical advisor or something like that on the STAR Plus program for rangelands. And one of the components of that program, as you may know, is has the producer created a drought plan. And so I've heard from a couple different people that they want technical assistance with creating drought plans. Some people don't, but some people do. Some producers don't currently have a drought plan. So we have an initiative where you could actually just refer to us and we could assist a producer in creating a drought plan if that's desirable for them. We're calling ourselves Colorado Ag Drought Advisors, and we have funding through a couple different sources, but one in particular, we'll be launching a program in June that provides a financial incentive for a producer who wants to create a drought plan. It's a small incentive, it's $500, and then there's an additional $1,000 that they could get for any sort of technical assistance to help create that plan. So it might be a private sector service like talking to an attorney about actually legacy planning, or talking to a water lawyer or something like that that's not available through a public service. And we found that we did this dry run last year where we had one-on-ones with producers about drought plans. What we really found there is that some of the things that producers need to increase drought resilience are not public sector, they're private sector. So that's why we have that segment. So we'll be rolling this out in June. Like I said, we're hiring someone to administer the program. That person will be an employee at Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. If any of you want to apply or know someone who does, it's a 3/4 time position and has full benefits. So it might be really good for a producer. We could shift the work into different times of the year. So it might be really good for a producer who wanted work at certain times of year and wanted the benefits potentially. So that's one thing that we'll be doing. We can also advise on drought plans, whether or not people opt in for the stipend. But if you want this, or opting for the financial incentive, if you want the financial incentive, obviously you have to have a written drought plan.
And is that drought advisory position geared towards rangeland?
It's all lands, yeah.
Wildlife?
All crop system types, yeah. So we have different, I'm a rangeland specialist, and so when people talk about irrigation, I'm like, huh? We don't do that in rangelands, but we have other people on our team who have different specialties. Because that really came up. So another part of our goal, and I think many of you participated in this, but we just got through with a hybrid drought planning series. So we have 4 webinars, they're on our website, and they target different aspects of drought planning. We had a forecasting one, a livestock range one, a financial and risk management one, and then a crop systems one. And all of those are, you can watch those webinars, they're on our website currently, I'll show that at the end. What that website is, well, it's drought.extension.colostate.edu. And then we're also migrating, this does not exist yet, but we're migrating the content to a nicer website that will have a lot of technical resources about drought for agriculture. So if you go on the website right now and you're like, this is clunky, you are correct, but that's the platform we have now, and we are working on migrating it. And so the funds to actually do that came from the CDA and the drought stimulus, as well as the funds to put on the drought leadership, or we call it the drought leadership training series that we just put on. So I was going to talk, should I talk about drought, or are we all dialed in on the drought issue? Okay. Well, okay, I'll say 2 things. One is, drought is part of our reality here in Western Colorado.
These are from the Colorado Plains, or the Central Plains Experimental Range, but it's true in our region too. And this is the same pasture, same management, and I think it just shows the wild fluctuation that we experience here in Colorado in terms of production. You know, so 2002, 200 pounds per acre, and then 2003, 1,300 pounds per acre. And then back down in 2004, back up in 2005. So we have a ton of fluctuation. The western slope, you all probably know, does not fluctuate quite this much as far as I see. You know, this is pretty extreme. They don't have shrubs. It's just a lot more fluctuation, but we still have the same issues. We don't have the same amount of production every single year. And how that influences soil health is that, you know, on a rangeland, we can't really build soil health if we don't have the above ground production. The above ground production is what drives the below ground production in terms of soil health. So in terms of, that's why a drought plan is important, shameless plug. But we can't really build that below ground soil health if we're not managing well above ground. And what that means essentially is preparing for fluctuations in production amounts in terms of the management plan. So this is a really great article if anyone wants to check it out. I think it's on multiple websites, but it's very powery and from the University of Arizona, but it just is a great summary of rangeland management before, during, and after drought. And I do think it has a lot of connections with soil health. Because again, you can't really do a good job building soil health unless you're managing well for drought. And these are also, last fall, if anyone came to the Colorado section for the Society for Range Management, we sort of did a dead bunchgrass tour, which was depressing. But you know, in our part of the world, in Grand Junction, we have some evidence that bunchgrasses or cool seasons are really at the edge of their range here. And so with the added heat that we've been experiencing, it's expected that we will see more die-off in the cool season bunchgrasses. This is less true at higher elevations and wetter areas, but this is an area outside Grand Junction where I've certainly seen a lot of sorry looking bunchgrasses over the past couple of years. This land actually isn't grazed. I think it's just that additional, the drought stress that we've been experiencing. So I do think that range management is just absolutely critical for long-term resilience as well. So there's my shameless plug. Real quick, if drought plans don't have to be strategic planning documents that are thousands of pages. It's pretty dang simple. And there's different formulas or formats and workbooks from different states. One of our deliverables as well is to create a Colorado specific workbook for making a drought plan. But pretty much you could boil it down to 4 components. You're just assessing where you are. You're making a plan which consists of goals, decision points, and strategies. You're actually implementing that plan when you have a drought, or even when you don't have a drought, maybe building forward on strategies that you can't do during a drought, and then you're learning from that plan. So really simple, and there are worksheets that exist from different states, and then we're adapting them for Colorado. So that's what we're doing with this Drought Advisors program. Yeah, this is our website here, currently droughtextension.coloradostate.edu. Again, sorry for the clunkiness, but we do have all of our webinars and the resources associated with them up there. If you want to check those out. And then I think we also have those planning guides linked from that site. If you have any questions, you can always contact me. I'll make sure Ryan gives you my contact info if you don't already have it.
For water management entities, like irrigation, or management reservoirs.
Yeah, 2 people involved in the project are Amber Weber, who is part of the Ditch and Reservoir Company Alliance, and Greg Peterson. So I would refer to those 2 individuals. We haven't, I guess, defined the scope. Our focus primarily was just agricultural producers, but maybe we can talk more about expanding the scope if interesting, and that would definitely be in their wheelhouse.
You were a district manager and you were putting on an educational event to try and shed some light on how to build soil health on rangeland.
Well, I could invite Jeff Herrick, but whether or not he can come is different. But it seems like he can travel now. Some of the federal folks haven't been able to travel. But Jeff Herrick's a soil scientist. He's probably, if he's on Zoom, he's like, why are you volunteering me? But he's a soil scientist. He came out of the Coronado Experimental Range in Las Cruces, and he's really one of the founding fathers of rangeland health indicators that we use on rangelands. So I guess it would depend on the role. I think Jeff is definitely going to be reality-based and very much in tune with rangeland health opportunities and success. But he's not going to say, he may not be inspirational in the sense of like, he's going to be reality-based. He's not going to say you can do things that aren't realistic. So it might depend on what your audience wants. But I think Jeff's a great speaker, really nice person. And then another person, but this person's really busy, but Justin Durner is, well, none of us are in the Eastern Plains, but he has like 70 years of grazing treatments at the Colorado Central Plains Experimental Range that he manages. And he's also a great speaker. He will have challenges with travel right now because he's ARS, but he just really understands the soil dynamics as it relates to grazing. I guess I'm in the science world, so maybe you're asking the wrong person. But I mean, I would also be happy to give a layperson talk, but I don't have the clout. But I would be happy to break down the principles and give a talk. And then I'm sure that there's a range of other speakers too.
And on the drought plan, I'm kind of focusing on the range one, but any of them, do you have any experience yet on, you write a master plan, the producer writes a master plan. Do they actually do it? Do they have the courage to de-stock or in the irrigated agriculture, whatever thing? Or when they get up to the precipice, do they say, yeah, well, I guess I'm.
I mean, I'm sure that happens. I think, well, so one of our webinars, we had 4 producers speak about their drought plans. And I think one thing I've heard from producers, and actually comes out in social science that's been done by the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, is that the plan can help reduce stress because it gives you some direction when you have a lot of uncertainty about the decisions you could make and what their outcomes might be. So I can't say that people will do what they said they would do, and also the world might change, your plan might not be useful anymore. But at least from some producers I've talked to, the plan is actually useful because it reduces stress in uncertain situations. But all of us pretend we're going to do stuff and we don't, right? So.
Wasn't it you that brought up the financial planning?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've seen out in producers, a lot of this is dependent upon where the producer is in life, right? So, I was out at a place and the rancher said to me, when I was young and had bills to pay, I could beat them out of this ground. And now he's not going to quit until his grass gets his goal. Right? That's his goal. So I think, context is important. Again, I go back to the consultation forms, right? I think will somebody do it? I think it depends on where they're at financially, right? You got bills to pay. Right?
There's some cool examples.
Yeah.
But I think one thing I've heard again and again is it needs to be simple. It's too complicated, people don't do things. And also we can never make a plan that's going to actually reflect reality in the complexity that reality is. So. Cool. That was the shameless rangeland propaganda, which is now going to continue. So, okay, so I mentioned, I think there's some really cool new tools available now that are available to us all, and I think help understand what's been happening on lands, especially rangelands, and then might also help with the question someone asked, well, many of us have asked about, in a rangeland scenario, where the heck are we putting the soil sampling points, because rangelands are so extensive and they're diverse and that kind of thing. So here's one tool you could use to think about where to put the plots. So is they've taken years of data that was collected by the Bureau of Land Management and the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and then correlated it with Landsat satellite imagery going back to 1984, 1986. Sorry, 1984. So they have 75,000 plots that they correlated with that satellite imagery, and so we're able to sort of go back in time and see how functional groups or cover functional groups are changing on the landscape. And this is publicly available. I'll go there in a second. Hopefully the internet doesn't fail and just do a quick demo of how to use this. But so it's pretty cool. Let's just say that. It doesn't do everything, but it's pretty cool because when you go out and sample, let's say tomorrow, you're getting that point in time. You're not getting the past 30 years unless you potentially have a memory, or well, hopefully we all have a memory, but unless you have a memory of that specific place or have access to someone who's been managing on that land. So I think it's really useful. They lump data into these categories: annual foreign grass cover, perennial foreign grass cover, shrub cover, tree cover, and bare ground. So the satellite can't distinguish species at this scale, or they haven't trained it to yet. And it also doesn't separate perennial forb and perennial grass. But again, I think it's a starting spot. And then this is what you can get out of the tools. You draw a polygon. This is the mid-80s. And you can get these lines of, by functional group, how has that changed? And you see the variability that is part of our climate here, with it going up and down every year, but there's some trends in this particular spot. So they have 3 different types of data, and I'll demonstrate each of these, but they have production or above ground growth. This, is a key variable for soil health, actually, because it goes back to that drought question of we need to be stocking at a rate that is consistent with how much supply there is on that landscape. Otherwise, demand cannot exceed supply, no matter how fast you rotate. It just doesn't work like that. So we really need to be cognizant of what the supply is. That's been pretty hard to measure historically because of how many plots you might need to do, especially in western Colorado rangelands. So, although there's other ways for measuring it, lots of other ways, but this is one tool. So they have production data in here. The production data they created using a model. So they created a forage growth model, and then they correlated it with ground truth data. So it's a little different than the cover data in terms of how they got it. But then they also have real-time 16-day biomass. So every 16 days that you can look at how the growth of this year compares to other years. And I'll go there. I think, again, that's a really cool drought planning tool. And then they have covered by functional group, which I just showed a bit of. And I think all these data types answer different questions, right? So production really tells you how much forage is out there compared to what you might need. 16-day biomass, I think, is really significant for drought planning. So how much forage you might have out there compared to other years. And then covered by functional group. Traditionally, cover was considered a trend variable. So this is much more sensitive to trend. So how does it work? I'll go live in a second, but basically you draw a polygon. This is Moffat County. Just for no particular reason, you draw a polygon, you set a time frame, and then the data, extract the data. So examples of the data, the tool creates these diagrams for you. I put the data in Excel in this case and made a different diagram, but basically you can see 1986 to 2022, pounds per acre production. And then you can elucidate, where you are relative to long-term trends or whatever you want to do with this data. The creators of this tool are the first to say, don't bet the ranch on this tool, or don't bet your entire assessment on it. They are very good at articulating it's a tool that you can use. It's not the truth necessarily. You have to calibrate with your own experience. So I wouldn't necessarily take these raw numbers and think that's what's out there. I would calibrate with experience. But again, starting point, since if you just go out and you clip a plot tomorrow, you're not going to have this whole history. So I think they're useful. This is what the 16-day biomass looks like. This dark black line is the in-year production. And then the bands represent, I think this is 25% of average, and this is 125% of average. So you can see, yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question? Does anybody have any dietary restrictions where it works? They don't know it until later. Yeah, sorry.
Worst workshop ever. But, so basically, you can sort of see where you are relative to long-term averages, which is useful. And we'll go live on this one, but you can, in year 2022, as things start to grow, this one will start to come. Then you can see where you are. And they also reveal things like where our production comes from, wherever we draw the polygon. So, you know, we talk a lot in the range management field of, you don't really have to wait until July to know that you're not going to have enough grass, right? Because the steepest part of the grass growth curve is early in the season. So we kind of know early on if we're not going to have, we hypothetically could know. Last year was a little bit weird in the western slope, but this is Jackson County, just another example of output. And then covered by a functional group, which I've already showed. So it can give you this is perennial forests on the top, grasses there. So it can give you the history by functional group, what's happening in the landscape. And cover, if you're not familiar with it, is if you're looking straight down at the ground, it's as if you were a raindrop. What functional group would you hit when you fell? Or paragraph, yeah.
Just real quick, functional group, is that an ecocide or what?
Oh. Functional group, the question was on what is functional group? It's just a way of lumping plants. So it's, grasses and perennial forests in this case, they're a functional group. So it's just the vegetation type because we're not doing on the species level. Yeah. So I think, well, you can lump things differently, but the idea is you're lumping vegetation types together or species together that have a similar function in the ecosystem. So like annual grasses and annual forests, similar function. So one thing I caution with this data platform is you can get a lot of data really quickly, but it absolutely does not tell you why trends are occurring. So you can see alarming stuff like this. This is annual forests and grasses. I think we're not moving in the right direction, but if we just look at this data in isolation, there's no, what are we missing here? Yeah, precipitation. Well, where we are on the Earth's surface. Yeah, so we're missing a bunch of information. So we really don't know why this is happening, but we do see this trend. All right. So then, Rangelands Analysis Platform, here's a shout out to a tool we made. While they were developing their Production Explorer, we were able to use their data, because their data is public, to create our own stocking rate calculator app. So we sort of had a little arms race there. And we did create an app. It's on our website, the Rangelands Management website, the CSU extension. And it works the same way as the Rangelands Analysis Platform, but it doesn't give you the raw production values. But basically, you draw a polygon, you can set a average year, below average, above average. You can actually choose if you want the data to be Rangelands Analysis Platform or web soil survey, and then it calculates whatever you want the output to be, number of animals or AUMs, it calculates that. So this is our app. We also have precipitation data, so it's real-time precipitation compared to long-term averages. And we have drought, the Palmer Drought Severity Index here. And then you can also edit your own forage estimates if you have them in this tool. So with that, I could demonstrate the Rangelands Analysis Platform quickly. Oops, I guess I'll save that. So, going to take a second to load. Okay.
But it's knowledge that drives these models, it's all remote sensing.
Yeah, it's remote sensing correlated with publicly collected data.
Some field data.
Yeah.
Correlated with the remote sensing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. All right, so this is pretty easy to use. Let's see here. This is the Rangelands Analysis Platform. This is the tool you use for if you wanted to explore production. And you can upload shape files or KML files, but today we'll just draw picture or draw a polygon. You can set your analysis timeframe. This is essentially the baseline. So if you're like, well, yes, it has been very dry since 2000. So if you wanted your baseline to be from 2000 to present, you could do that, or you could do 1986 to present. And then you can exclude croplands, developments, and water. And then basically you zoom in. Tell me when to stop zooming. Or if I should go right or left. Okay, so we'll do this. And I'll draw a polygon. So you can, I mean, obviously this isn't a management unit, but you could do it as a management unit. And then you calculate the time series. It will take a second. Yeah. Ponder what lunch you wanted that you're not going to get. So, okay. So then it did that. So then you can go to the current year production. And so this, obviously, this is that curve that starts in 2022. It's not really doing anything yet because it's March, but then you can see the average growth curves here. So this is what, 150% of average. This is 50% of average, sorry, not 25. But you can do it for different years too. So you can choose what year should you choose. Two 2007, okay. So 2007. Contrast, we could do, let's say, 2020. Or we could do 2001. So you could play there for the rest of your life. But basically, you can see, 2001 is this, and we're on track with 2001. And 2002 was more horrendous, right? Oh, okay. So then we could see 2002. So we're tracking along this, and 2002 was really bad. We know that maybe things aren't the way we want them to be. So, and then this is just another way of looking at that data. Then you can look at historical production, and that's what you see here. And then they have this stocking rate tab. And actually you can export this and create a pretty nice report. That tool. And then they are in the process of creating a bunch of other stuff, but this is the main wrap interface. It's nationwide. Again, you zoom to a spot you want, and this is where you would get that cover data if you wanted it. So again, you can import a shape file or a KML file like this, grab this, and then it will give you your cover trends. So, and it's 30 by 30 meter resolution. So we were discussing, if the management treatment is smaller than that, this tool's really not going to measure anything that happens there. But anyway, I think it's a useful tool. It's a way to potentially stratify points. And it's a way to understand the history in context of whatever management people choose. It's a way to understand history. So with that, I think we can have a discussion or answer questions, and I'll hand it back over to Brian. You can't save the GPS coordinates in it, but you could save a KML file that has the GPS coordinates, like little KMLs you draw in Google Earth if you don't have GIS. And so you could save that file and just re-upload it to the platform. And if you have questions on it, I'd be happy to walk people through the tool. And they're really a friendly bunch, so you can always reach out to them. Cool.
That was awesome. Let's give her a I didn't see that. Okay. I'll pretend to be an accident here for a second. Oh. Sorry. Let's see what that's going to be quicker. Okay, I apologize in advance again. I'm going to be jumping around. I've never given Ian's talk. I saw it on Tuesday. So I will do the best that I can. Know that there will be many resources coming for soil moisture probe installation. Okay, so this is going to be very coarse. There'll be more granular instructions in the future. Ian and Jay, Ian works for JHAM. JHAM is the micrometeorologist, soil physicist at CSU. And they've been working with CSU Ventures, City Fort Collins, and the Irrigation Innovation Consortium to develop these really low cost soil moisture probes, right? Has anybody in here ever installed soil moisture probes? Okay. Are they cheap? No. Right. So what's a cheap soil moisture probe cost?
You could install like a watermark probe for $35-40, and then you use a handheld reader, which is $200, but it'll read everything.
Right.
We get carried around.
Right. So what they're looking at is a production cost of about $250, and they have different antennas, obviously, but they're working right now with getting Verizon and Sprint. But they have AT&T and anyways, they do a lot of Internet of Things. And maybe I'm getting a little ahead of it because again, I'm not familiar. But aridification is one of, I think, 43 or 47% of the world's agricultural lands are in danger of aridification, right? And so that's the number one concern for soil health and agriculture across the world. As we can see here, right, drought is fairly extensive and pretty common in the West. I think Ian and Jay would say that, you know, having soil moisture data is like having a gas gauge in the car, right? It allows you to kind of understand where you're at, where you're heading, and make decisions accordingly, right? And the stuff that they're developing, like I said, is really, you know.
I should add, you know, if you want telemetry,
yeah,
it's going to be $3,000 per, you know,
right,
per station.
Right. So that's what we're kind of talking about. Is something that's, you know, a tenth the cost roughly of what commercial grade stuff is. They've ground truthed a lot of this. But anyways, the important data here is drought, and we use about 70% of our water in Western U.S. for irrigation, right? So knowing what we have in the ground is really important. Oh, there's a gas gauge. I used it. So properly measuring the soil moisture to make these decisions helps reduce wasted resources, avoiding fines, detect failures in systems, and saving time, right? People like Greg and I always like to go out and dig holes to see how much moisture there is, right? But this is a nice, cheap, easy way to cheat the system. Let's see here. Oh, so smart irrigation controllers that integrate soil moisture sensors have shown up to 72% savings over traditional timer-based methods. So there's a lot of advantages to using these soil moisture probes. I think it's going to be good data for the program to have moving forward. That aggregated data to kind of give us an idea how are these soil health practices impacting the water holding capacity, infiltration rates, things of that nature. So I think the foundation here, if you can see, what they're working on right now is and filing patents for is really removing the wires from the system. So the next iteration, they talk about putting sensors in the skin of the earth, right? And these sensors will be able to go in without having wires and be able to talk to those telemetry-based systems and upload the data in real time. And that's kind of what we have here is just how that would work, moving that to the cloud. Here's the nuts and bolts of it. As you can see, Ian's installed 2 soil moisture probes, one at 2 inches depth, one at 6 inches or 4 inches. So you'll be able to calculate your infiltration rate by when it hits these sensors. And this is what you're gonna have in the field. You either have something that goes in a basic irrigation box, right? Or something on a pole. But this is kind of the setup that you're gonna have. You excavate this trench and then you have this clean face that you're gonna insert the probes into. This is the board that you'll see inside the box, and this is just for visual, right? The box with all the sensors coming in. Each data logger essentially can handle 5 soil moisture probes. So when it comes to you, hopefully it's going to be a fully assembled unit. It'll have 5 probes that you'll be able to install in the field. And I think what we need to determine here in the next coming days with the research scientists who are doing more research in the program is how many soil moisture probes you guys need to install, and what are those depths going to be, and that's coming. Sorry, I'm kind of reading this as I go. I apologize. I don't think we need to go through password. This just kind of shows the iterations of the soil moisture probes.
How long are those sensors, Ryan?
They're about 3 inches long, something like that. And you can see this is kind of, they 3D print all this stuff. And so this is the latest version. This is just the one that's pretty robust stick. You just kind of slide it in. And if you go back to this, you guys are all going to get one of these 3D printed for you. It's just a little handle so that when you stick that probe in, you've got something to push on instead of the back end, the wire sticking out. So when I say you're going to flip a switch, right? This is the nuts and bolts. This is what we're hoping to get to. There's just a little on-off button, and you can see there's an LED right here, and it'll blink green as it's looking for cell coverage, and then once it finds it, it'll what they call breathe cyan, right? It'll kind of pulse real slowly this light blue color. Okay, essentially that's what we're hoping that'll look like for you guys. You guys will put the sensor out there, plug them in, bury your trench, and then just open the box, turn that on, wait for it to breathe cyan, close the box, and walk away. The battery should be good for, depending on how often we upload that data, it should last somewhere between 4 or 5 months, right? So we're trying to encapsulate the growing season with that, right? And so there might be battery replacements and things like that. That's further on down. We can install solar with these as well. So that might be something in future iterations. This is just kind of showing how the data comes out and when it's uploaded to the site. This is the various data representations that you can get. You can see it in a battery, a thermometer, or in a graph like this. This is just some of the work that he did. Again, this is really what he's showing is the wireless connectivity to the data logger that goes over to this above ground gateway that sends it to the cloud, right? Something that they have integrated in this in these new sensors is this salinity response, and basically just by changing the frequency at which they measure, you can see this graph, right? It's just a frequency in megahertz. And so if you have no salts, depending on the frequency, it'll just be a flat line. But if you change the frequency, you see that you can basically track trends in salinity. So as we increase efficiency, right, we have that precipitation taking place.
Can we correlate electrical conductivity from that graph and quantify it in a term, how approximately?
Possibly that's definitely a key question. So email me that and I'll get that to you and have it respond. I'm thinking potentially.
I would think so.
Okay, so this is, you know, as you can see right here, this is a valve box installation that Ian's done on a golf course. Where he's got his soil probes in the side of the soil thing here, coming out here to this valve box where the sensor's sitting. And this is the pole installation that many of you might end up doing as well. But again, you want a fully integrated system here with the box just sitting on top, you know, easy peasy, mac and cheesy sort of stuff. And this is just the inside. So this is all waterproof here. What we're working on now is he's 3D printing a base for the posts. If you have to go that route, because animals like to chew those wires. So what we're doing is he's going to 3D print a bottom to the post. That's basically just a plastic that they 3D print that the wires will come out above the point and be protected. So if you pound the post in, the wires will go out into the ground without having to do that afterwards, right? So all you have to do is pound the pole in like a stake in the ground and then set the box on top. And there's a protective cover that goes on top so you can beat it in with the wire sticking out so you don't cut those. The antennas, the connectivity, right now they have AT&T, T-Mobile, they're working on Sprint, Verizon. And these are some antennas. They have antennas that kind of basically go out into the world like your cell phone kind of does. But we also have directional antennas. So if you look at the map and you can locate that, you know, AT&T antenna, for example, you can basically point the antenna in that direction. And again, wait for that receiver to breathe, sign out.
Is the producer gonna have to pay like a monthly fee for that, or is that state?
No, everything's covered in the agreement. I don't know what future services will look like, but you know, the way everything's kind of trending is, you know, we'll give you the stuff, you pay for a service for that, right? And then you can access your data all the time. But I don't want to speak about that. The really cool thing that happened earlier this year, is anybody familiar with the Argos satellite system? So anytime you watch like a National Geographic Channel special on like blue whales or elephants, where they're tagged, the Argos system is how they track those animals across the earth, right? We were actually given permission to use that. So that is not going to happen this year, but possibly next year, in areas with no connectivity, we'll be able to put out those boxes with the Argos satellite. So basically, no matter where you are on planet Earth, even if you don't have cell connectivity, you can get that data out to the. Okay, so I'll just stress this again. We went over site selection with soil sampling. Much of the same things apply here too, right? If we're doing furrow irrigation, for example, flood irrigation, where might we want to put the soil moisture probe? What makes the most sense to you? Right, furthest away from where you're starting your irrigation, right? Because that's where your waste would occur if you have some, but that's where you're going to find out, you know, how much water am I getting at the end of it, right? So those are things to take into consideration when you install this moisture probes. Right? It's not going to do you any good if you put it up near the top of the field where you're starting. So, and this just shows the two different styles that Ian's providing us, which is, you know, this valve box, just like you'd see at your house, right? Something you can go pick up at Home Depot if you're building an irrigation system at home, right? There's just a little valve box, and then this pole system right here. More pictures of what's going on here. I think he would say, you know, this was fenced off, but the cow's still in that opinion. So those are considerations, right? Are there going to be livestock issues with the probes? They are building a website. These are the groups that they collaborated with on this project, and we'll do the demonstration outside is going to come and show you a little bit better about, you know, how it actually is. That's what I want you guys to take away. It's not rocket science, but there are some things that go into it.
Wow, so that the user can access it.
Yeah, so the producer will have basically a login and a password, just like anything else that you access. I believe right now it's on the CSU servers, is where that data will be housed. And so they'll log in and they can see their own stuff. We're hoping that they'll have a life, 10 to 15 years, but for the duration of the project. Yeah, I would think, you can, in fact, if you're working in a tilt system, thank you for asking that, because that's what I was just thinking. Yeah, you'll have to go out and pull those up if there's totals involved.
And is this for one producer or every producer has involved us to help the question?
So if it's, so the 319 grant will not have slow motion approach. They will have the research focused field that are working with those districts will have edge of field water quality. The CPP districts will, and the CIG districts that are participating will all get slow motion approach. Everyone will slow motion. The 319 grant gets the edge of field water quality. But I don't think that research focused field is identified for you guys. So you guys don't have to skip that. I think it's just route, West Otero, Tempest, and Boulder Valley are the three.
So we won't have a research. Okay, I have so many questions I forgot about just now. Okay, so is there recommendations on like whether or not to put them in the box or put them on the post?
So the question was, does it go in the box or on the post? And that's predicated by what kind of cellular connection.
Also, probably what type of cropping system it is.
Right. So if we're in corn, right, we're probably gonna want that on the 3 feet of post. Maybe 7 or 8 feet off the ground.
Or if you're cutting hay over the top of it 3 times a year, you might want to set it down in a little box so you can drive right over.
Right. But if you don't have connectivity, right? So again, that antenna is gonna, like, your connectivity is gonna tell you.
Can you run the antenna like underground water to get to the field? Or?
So you can, yeah. So that's one of those things you can trench, right? And a little more easily after something's been plowed for sure. So that's, I think the connectivity issue is going to drive whether it goes above ground.
Okay, and then what about, some of our places are getting pretty hot. It's just sitting in the sun. Do these boxes have pretty good temperature regulation?
Yeah, they're pretty soft. Yeah.
Okay. So.
And I would also add not a problem.
Okay. All right.
That'll be an easy thing. I don't know if it wants to insulate them, but I think that's why they're only covered. We can always, if you remember.
Okay, and then what if there is, I don't think those for producers are enough, so coverage, but there's one that may not.
Right. So that might be one we identify for your 2 or 3 with the Arcus side. Anybody else? Okay.
And, soil moisture sensing and irrigation timing is based on the assumption that the water is available when you need it. Am I the only farmer in Colorado that doesn't have water available on demand whenever I need it?
That's what I heard.
Pretty much.
You're pretty famous in the circles. Everybody else is like, man, we're golden. Poor Paul.
I thought that was the case. But I don't know why anybody says that they don't have the water.
Well, so I think the argument can be made, and I mean, so some of these are going in droplet systems, some of these are going in rangeland systems, and never see irrigation, right? So I think the powerful thing here is what we can say when we aggregate that data and query that database, right? Is let's say, based on region and state, for example, let's say I'm looking at, you know, res wrap, right? Or some other type of tool that I want to try and estimate production, right? You'd be able to look at how much is your soil, how much moisture is your soil holding in like November, might be a good indication of what your production will be come spring, right? So to be able to make those management decisions in advance. Again, in years, I mean, can Paul get a crop of triticale based on what he's got in the soil? That might be useful. If no water comes, can I still get that triticale and get it harvested, right? I think that can be helpful.
So also with the information having been collected, say it's going in somewhere that is irrigated, side roll. If it isn't efficient and the soil probes show that it is inefficient, does that assistance like give better management? Is that something that would happen, like as far as changing the nozzle sizes or that nature? Is that something that, I mean, where we're going, yes,
Kind of where we're going with the wireless sensors, right? Is that basically your side roll or your center pivot would be looking ahead, looking at how much water is actually in the soil. I mean, and just based on, right, smart irrigation controls and integrated soil moisture sensors, we've shown up with 72% savings, right? Yeah. So we're increasing our efficiency. So I mean, I think that's where we're kind of heading, especially with variable rate, you know, heads and systems that control themselves, right? The soil moisture data really, you know, if you could be able to basically irrigate super efficient.
There's some way to check the efficiency of the existing sprinkler system too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we have all the programs for that. That's what we do is design all those. I was just wondering, so I'd like to take the information of the actual soil growth versus the actual mathematics that we utilize, right, to say what analysis we do recommend for our projects and stuff.
And you can validate that with, you know, simple upgrade.
Yeah, I saw it actually. See a real time thing on how it happens. You know, you don't see so much from a survey AutoCAD, right, versus actually being out there and checking it. Sure.
What are the units that are measured the data?
Centaurs.
Kilopascals. So it'll still work on the standard curve for plant available water.
Yeah.
Capacity. Based on your soil type too.
Right. Which you'll have because we're doing texture by background.
So you might have mentioned this, but we get one unit that has 5 probes. So how much coverage does that give?
Depends on how far you want to trench and how much water you want to buy. So I would go back to what is a representative sample? You're looking for a representation of the field, right? So let's say you're on a you know, quarter section center pivot, right? You have a little dip and a little hill, probably not good places to put that, right? But you just like with your soil sampling, you look and you say, what is representative? You could, like many people have suggested, you can go on your look up your soil data, see if there's different soils within that field. Look at past soil tests with you know, texture by hydrometer, texture estimates by field, and give yourself a better idea of what that's. Because if you have a mostly sandy or coarse texture field, and you have a spot of, you know, heavy clay, probably more coarse textures.
Is there a little manual that's gonna come with this stuff, like trenching depth?
Yes, and tons of YouTube videos that we have scheduled for the 15th of April an install in Longmont. Mostly because it's close to home, and if there are any problems, Ian's 35 minutes away. But we're gonna videotape that whole thing. looks really kind of scary if you've never done it before, but I mean, it's really site selection to match your goals is probably the most difficult part of this.
And that's something probably our.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I mean, ideally, you know, if we can get some soil health specialists hired, ideally what I would like to have happen is the first soil moisture probe installation at every district gets an assist from myself and Ian, or myself or Ian, or somebody's gonna come help me do that. Yeah, I mean, there's folks around the state who will be helping, but like I said, I mean, I'd like for Ian to go out and do the install, at least the first install with every district. Because this is his tech, he's developed it, designed it, filed all the patents. I'm not gonna promise that, because I don't know if but that's what I'd like to see. Anybody else? Okay, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Steve. He's going to talk to you about PandPKS. Just over back.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Leger, again with Ag Experimentation. I have statewide responsibilities for rangeland soil health issues. And I just started last fall, and kind of looking at the kind of canvassing the publications, the literature to see what's been done and where in terms of the impacts of grazing on different soil properties. And I'm also going to get into a summer thing that's here. Research has been done there in terms of carbon, maybe some carbon sequestration. But what I'm talking about today is rangeland monitoring for star grazing limits. And I have the word optional there because I'm just going to present one tool you could use in terms of monitoring. And Red already talked about RAT. I'm going to talk about PandPKS, which is a mobile app that was put out about, it's a free app you can download. And in fact, if you want to, at some point between now and after lunch, you can try downloading that and you can go outside and kind of learn a few things and choose how it works. It's pretty straightforward. I just have I threw in some photos from some monitoring stuff I was doing in Wyoming before that point. So just didn't have a chance to use it. So anyway, what is PandPKS? Well, it stands for Land Potential Knowledge System. I'm trying to guess what that was. But anyway, that's what it means. And so the land potential, basically, it's trying to, you can learn about the land's inherent potential in terms of generating different ecosystem services, such as forage production, ability for different habitats, all kinds of ways to go to this potential. But for starting, we're focusing on forage production. Again, there's a mobile app which you can download. You can go online and also access your data for all the different things with it. It also, if you go to landpotential.org, if you get nothing else out of this talk, if you write down that website and go there, they have a tremendous amount of support information, and training videos, just all kinds of information about how to use this. It's really good. One of the reasons I really like this is because it's really well supported. We keep the app up to date. And the whole idea is we're looking at long-term changes from whatever you mentioned, goals you have, or responses to that. So why use PandPKS? Well, and I should put free in there. It's free. It's pretty simple. This app, it's repeatable. And so the first thing you do is once you decide where you want to monitor, you have a feature lat longitude, go out in the field with the app open. So the GPS button locates you on the map, and then if you have connectivity, it links it to the RCS soil survey data, and then also ecological site data if that's available. So this is, I just have an example here. This is Morgan County, ecological site map. And just to, if you're not familiar with kind of soil maps and ecological site maps, the ecological site map tends to be like a higher level classification of the landscape. With the soil survey, you've got dozens and dozens of different soil units within a given county or given area. But what the ecological sites do is they sort of lump those together. They take similar soils, lump them together, and you also get a lot of information in terms of what type of vegetation to expect in ecological sites. So if you're not familiar with the area, this is a good place to start. Go and see what kind of plant communities tend to be found in these different sites. Let's see. Okay, so there's all kinds of different options in PandPKS. I'm just going to focus on two of them. The first one deals with the soil characterization, kind of getting ecological site of the soils, and then also what we're going to do is show a demo of Jeff doing some vegetation monitoring, and then we'll have a chance after lunch to check that out on that side. So again, it's and I'm going through this kind of fast. You don't need to. There's in your information packet, there's kind of a step-by-step way to go through this. And also you can go back online, lots of good tutorials. But after you create the account, you push that little plus button where it says My Locations. And then if you've got connectivity, then you can hit that GPS button and it'll locate you. And the other interesting thing, or the other cool thing is that, so you can choose whether or not to share your data with the rest of the world or keep it private. So if you're worried about that, you can either turn that off or on. All right, so you're out in the field, you hit the GPS, it's located you. First thing it does when it pulls down that soils information is it ranks the what you're most likely standing on based on the soil mass. And I mean, it takes some, oops. Right.
Just blast through it.
Sorry about that. So what Jeff Herrick suggests is when you after you identify where you want to do the monitoring is to figure out what soil you've got. And to actually check, go out of the field and dig a hole. So you're going to be out there sampling. If you dig a little deeper, you can kind of, the app, it ranks them again. So here's this first soil, which is a Sacantha. This happens to be near my house where I was messing around with this app. So I'm going to go out there and try to figure out exactly what soil, as close as you can, that you're standing on, because that way, then that's going to link up to the ecological site description. You can just have a better, more accurate interpretation of what's going on at the site. There are a few other, a lot of it, all this is optional. It's not going to, you don't have to fill out everything before you keep going through the different modules. But and these other ones are pretty, some are easier than others, and they ask you for land use, slope, texture, and some other things. You can kind of put it on. But so what I want to focus on then is the land cover or vegetation module. This is where we get into the monitoring. This is essentially a streamlined version of a line intercept, where we can get a lot of good information in a fairly short amount of time. Composition and cover, and also some other things like plant height, some gaps between plants, between canopy, and if you're interested in certain species, Say a certain type of forage, or maybe an invasive species. Just set up some grids, square meters and count plants, so you can capture that and monitor that over time. So, then there's questions like, so when should you monitor? Again, that kind of, a lot of these questions are driven by your management goals, right? So if you're interested in cool season grasses, you might want to focus your monitor year to year on kind of earlier in the growing season. Or maybe you want to look at after the cattle have gone through and grazed, you can kind of come in at the end, in the early fall, and just, if you go back roughly the same time year to year. And I say year to year, but you can also, you don't necessarily have to go out every year. The changes don't necessarily happen that fast. You might have 2 to 3 years. You can set up different monitoring sites and kind of cycle through, depending on how many pastures you have, how many different ecological sites there are, which gets into where to monitor. And as everybody's talked about today, you're representing the site, right? So you want to, we're looking at, that's where this ecological, the sites come in handy. So if you know where your pastures are on the landscape, you can pull up these ecological site maps. Maybe you have 2 distinct ecological sites, and then you can set up a monitoring spot on like the woolly sand, the woolly plains, and one of the sandy plains. You kind of compare how those communities are changing over time. So yeah, and then once it's important to, you want to be able to come back to the same site year after year. Otherwise, the data gets, it's going to get kind of noisy and you're not going to be able to track what's going on. So things like, if you hammer in, you've got the GPS location, but if you hammer some rebar and put a tire on something, or you want to locate a spot, I mean, if you just put a flag in, that's probably not going to be there a year or 2 when you track it. Let's see. And again, there's that privacy button there. You don't want to share your data. This screen doesn't have it, but there's a lot of these screenshots. A lot of the pages have little question marks on, so you can click on those and it gives you more information if you get stuck somewhere. And also, I would recommend taking. It's real easy to just go out and take a photo, right? You got your monitoring site, shoot a photo, write some notes about, talk about the pasture, is it a dry year, wet year, however much you throw in. So you can refer back to it. So now we're going to get into the how part of this. You go into the field calculator, and these are some screenshots that you can kind of work your way through. The first thing that shows up is a calendar. We'll have today's date on it. You just touch that, and you get 2 choices. You have a cover or structure, which is what I'm going to focus on, and there's also utilization, which is more of a short-term, how much forage you're taking off. But we're going to focus on cover and structure monitoring. So what you're going to do then is after you selected your point, this little symbol here represents the center of the point. You're going to run 4 transects. They're going to be 90 degrees apart. And I like to use a compass. Most phones have like a GPS compass on there, and just in order to kind of keep straight lines and also kind of set them off 90 degrees from each other. Because what you're trying to do is avoid bias. Because once you select, just pick a number ahead of time, 0 degrees, then because if there's a big shrub there, you don't want to walk. If you start walking around shrubs and obstacles, then you're going to kind of skew your data. So you're going to just kind of stick to your guns there and power through. So what you're going to do is you're going to take from the center point, you're going to walk out 5 meters, and then you're going to put this stick, you just put a stick down and has these equal measures on them. You can use literally anything. I'm going to show Jeff Eric, just has a grab a stick out and put some marks on. I found this shelving bracket in my garage, and I just put some tape on it, and this is all you need, and a pin flat with something real thin. you got the app, you got your stick, and you got something like this, you're good to go. So you walk out 5 meters, you put your this down on the ground, and then you want to just kind of lower the flag until it hits the ground, and on the way down, you're looking at what this point intercepts. Is it touching a shrub, touching a perennial grass? And that's what all these are referring to. When you click on those, once you get the app down, it tells you if it's perennial grass, or is it woody litter, herbaceous litter, or even bare ground, in the rock. And you can have more than one of these. So for each, so at 5 meters, you're gonna select what the flag hit, 10, 20, 10, 15, 20, 25. You do that 4 times. So 25 observations times 4 transects, you get 100 points. So, and Jeff claims, and it's pretty accurate, that once you get this going, you get pretty comfortable with it. You can do one of these in about 20 minutes. It does go pretty fast. And I had this, the calibrate up here is, you know, if you're assuming you're out there with, you've got a couple of people out there doing this, you want to make sure you guys are getting roughly the same results. You know, when I mean, it takes a little bit used to, you go these point measures, you know, you want to make sure that you get about the same amount of bare ground as, you know, somebody else on the same transfer. Okay, so this is, I mean, I would recommend that everyone does this sort of cover, this point intersect measures, and then there's some optional ones depending on your interests, your management questions. You can look at vegetation height, you can look at basal gap, which is the gap in the plant bases, canopy gap, and all these things, you know, they kind of help get at the, you get method isn't terribly sensitive about picking up rare plants, you know, plants that just occur infrequently. So with a little extra work, you can set up a square meter each location and just, you know, you can count the species of interest. And then this is the data you get from once you've completed one monitoring site. It puts up some graphs for you, what percent covered by life form. And then as you go back, you know, a year or 2 or 3, then they'll start putting trend lines together for you. You can also pull this data off on your computer and throw it in Excel and your own graphs. So I just want to show a short demo and get this to work. Jeff Herrick doing some monitoring measurements.
I don't think I can.
Potential.org, by the way. We got about 8 minutes of Jeff Herrick taking us through the process. If you have any questions. higher. And then we'll open up the screen.
My contact information here.
This is just Steve's contact info. Yeah. About now.
Hello. Okay.